Welcome everybody to the Zoom version of Oracle Temple. Normally we would be in the Peace Pentagon, and we, since the COVID crisis started, have been switching to a Zoom format, which has actually allowed us to reach out further to people beyond our immediate community, and also to pipe in special guests like Swami Beyondananda. Steve Behrman is his real name, and Steve has been comfortable with his alter ego for about 23 years now. But I just want to give you a little glimpse into our speaker, if you've only known him as Swami or you've only known him as Steve, because he's not so schizophrenic. His entire life has been a beautiful search for truth, sharing of love and light, and actually has an academic side to it as well. As a Swami, he's written Driving Your Own Karma, When You See a Sacred Cow, Milk It for All It's Worth, Swami for Precedent, a 7-step plan to heal the body politic and cure erectile dysfunction. And as Steve, some people don't know this, he co-founded Pathways magazine, which was one of the first mind, body, spirit magazines to hit the New Age community. And he's also quite famous for co-authoring Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future, and A Way to Get There From Here, which he co-authored with Bruce Lipton. And then he also does a regular blog, which I am happy to receive when he puts pen to paper digitally. That's called Notes from the Trail. And that's where you'll find him blending his cosmic wit with his political side. He was a poli-sci major in college. So you can learn more about both Swami and Steve at his website. His main website is wakeuplaughing.com. And before I turn the program over to him, we are going to do our opening mantra. If you received a program, we should have received a program, you can say it with me. Source of all being, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the fear of death to the knowledge of immortality. Allow us to reunite with you and come to know your mysteries. And with that introduction, I am going to turn it over to, I'm not sure who's taking it here. I think it's the Swami.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. And guess what? No matter where we are, we're always here, right? And it's always now. So who would like to be in the now more? Oh, too late? Already then. If you want to be in the now, you have to be very, very quick. Although I predict that living in the now will be the wave of the future, and time itself will become a thing of the past. I tell you with great authority, the calendar's days are numbered. I know this because I was a futurist in a past life. Of course, now I spend all of my time in a timeless now. I think they call that Alzheimer's. Now I travel all over. It's great to actually be with you at the Oracle Institute. I have to say that I'm balancing it out. Next week, I am going to be at the Ventricle Institute, and that will make for a more wholehearted presentation today. I travel all over the place, and particularly with this crisis that we're facing, the COVID crisis, or as we call it, a situation. We have a situation. And I have to say, if you've been locked down with your loved ones for 3 months now, and your loved ones are still liked ones, you're in great shape. Now, I took this social distancing thing really, really seriously. I decided now is the time for me to take my trip. I've been putting off my trip around the galaxy to the center of the Milky Way. So I've been to the center of the Milky Way, and you'll never guess what is at the center of the Milky Way. Chewy nougat. Chewy nougat, that's right. I know you thought it was Three Musketeers, and I can hear the snickers, but that's what is there. On the way back, I stopped at the Ascended Masters Golf Tournament. Now, to be honest with you, I find watching golf is very boring. To me, watching golf is like listening to bowling on the radio. But the Ascended Masters is a fabulous event. This year, Buddha got a wholeness in oneness. And they held it in the Himalayas. And as you may know, in the Himalayas, there are beings who are so evolved that they no longer need to eat food, and they exist on breath alone. Well, somebody got the idea up there to open up the world's first breatharian restaurant. Well, they don't serve any food, but the atmosphere is terrific. So I had to go there. I'm sitting there. I see three guys walking by with clothes between noses like this. They were fasting. They were fasting. I spoke to one of them, and you won't believe this. This guy was so evolved that not only doesn't he eat food, he doesn't drink water either. His name is Pierre. Okay, that was time release. Tomorrow you're going to laugh for no reason, I promise. Well, back here on this particular planet, known throughout the galaxies as Comedy Central, well, things are pretty serious. In fact, people are so freaked out by all of the happenings happening that they're turning to the sky and they're going, is this the hand of God at work or just the middle finger? We're not sure. And in fact, people are talking about the end times, the end times. I met a man a few years ago who was disappointed and depressed because the rapture didn't happen. I said, so the rapture didn't happen. It's not the end of the world, huh? But still, I'm hearing this so much. I actually went to the Bible to see what the Bible has to say about the last days, and you won't believe what it said. A sign that the last days are at hand. It says, and the last trump shall blow. I know many people are thinking Trump blows. That could be understood. But I have to tell you that our president is America's balloon karma payment. He is here to awaken us. He is here to wake us up and to help us set forth an evolutionary uprising to overgrow the entire impeachable system. So you'll never hear me say anything bad about him, because behind every soulless healed, there is an unhealed soul. And so for you light workers tuning in, yes, it is not your job just to heal souls. It is your job to re-soul heals. I have a program for doing that. I call it From A-Hole to B-Hole. Now we're living in very, very interesting times. It has been predicted that a great shift will be taking place. And many people are asking, why is this shift happening to me? Well, because shift happens, that's why. The shift has hit the fan. And in this great opportunity for evolution, it is time for the people of the planet, humanity, to shift or get off the pot. Unless, of course, you need pot to shift and stay on the pot, because we found out recently that we all have these cannabinoid receptor sites in the brain, the part of the brain they call the hippocampus, the hippocampus. Now, when the hippocampus is stimulated, we see farce fields and laugh at invisible jokes. And so to answer your unasked question, yes, I tried it once, but I didn't exhale. Very important. Now, meanwhile, people are, of course, because of all of these changes, are consulting the great mystics on the planet. And as you may know, there are two kinds of mystics. There are the optimistics and the pessimistics. See, the pessimistics, they believe that they're more in touch with reality. But the optimistics are happier and live longer. The pessimists are saying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. The optimists are saying, no, it just looks that way because we are ascending. And so in these times, if we want to continue to ascend, we have to recognize that this is really a spiritual conversation. Very, very important for us to have a spiritual practice to create equanimity in these times of stress. I don't know how many people are practicing some form of mindfulness, but that is useful, because in this information age where we're inundated with so much information, we are suffering from what is called mindfulness. And so we must empty the mind through mindfulness. I went to a great mindfulness teacher, week-long silent retreat. It was so quiet, you could hear an opinion drop. And he taught me the great mindfulness practice. He said, if you want to be mindful and peaceful, two things. First of all, you have to clear your mind of all thoughts, and then you have to focus on the center of yourself. And I did this, and you won't believe it, I am now thoughtless and self-centered. Now, I do believe in spiritual practice. In fact, I have my power animal and spirit guide with me tonight, Bullwinkle, and I'll tell you why. Because no matter what your problem is, if you channel Bullwinkle to tell people your problems, it sounds funnier, okay? So let's say you lost your job and you have no money. Channel Bullwinkle. I just lost my job and I have no money. Yeah, that's a bit funnier, isn't it? Now you can see that I'm wearing my Musafix tonight. This is my Musafix. We have, this is the great icon. I play no favorites. I have a squirrel of David at home. And here we see, honoring another religion, we have flexible Muslims. Flexible Muslims, very important to have. And of course, I really was wondering, Jesus came to me in a dream. And he asked me to wear this. And I said, why? What does it mean? He said, it means, for Christ's sake, lighten up. Because the world is in serious condition, largely because of our conditioning to be serious. Seriously. Take our political system, please. We have a deeply divided body politic in this country. Half the people believe our system is broken. The other half believe it is fixed. And we have been divided into these two tribes, the red tribe Republicans and blue tribe Democrats, who spend all of their energy arguing about whether it is worse to kill the born or the unborn. Meanwhile, the Commonwealth has been stolen by a very, very, very small percentage of the uncommonly wealthy, and the bill has been sent to the not yet born. Well, what we need to do is bring left and right, front and center, to face the music and dance together, to turn the funk into function and leave the junk at the junction. And we do this by bringing red tribe and blue tribe together to sit in sacred circle and talk until they're purple in the face. Because only by being together as one purple people will the peeps outnumber the perps. Very, very important. And so it's important to see that in these times of great stress and strain, it is really a spiritual conversation. Every moment we have the choice. Do we feed love or do we feed fear? And the good news is love is more powerful than fear. Otherwise, we'd all be singing, all you need is fear. She fears you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, we're not singing that, and that is a very, very good thing. And so this is our choice. This is the time, as I said earlier, of the great evolutionary uprising. And we have a 4-step program, which is guaranteed to work 3 times faster than 12-step. Okay? Step number 1, wake up. Step number 2, wise up. Step number 3, grow up. Step number 4, show up. Wake up to the illusion of separation. In our political system, we've been hoodwinked by a bunch of winking hoods and divided into these 2 tribes. Wise up to the power of love and coherence and unity. I say that when things come to a head, we want to come to the heart. Because in the head, we have beliefs that keep us separated. And what people believe is totally unbelievable. So we need to leave the static of the head for the ecstatic of the heart. Because the more we expand our hearts, the less we're going to need to shrink our heads. Then we need to grow up. We need to grow upward in spiritual awareness. We need to grow from children of God to adults of good. And right now we're in that awkward middle phase called addled essence. Our essence has been addled by toxifying beliefs. You know, we have spent the last 5,000 years living under the rule of the lowest common denominator. And that the golden rule has been overruled by the rule of gold, which is do unto others before they can do unto you. And this, of course, has left us with a lot of residue. And that is our mission as we grow up as a species. Can we undo the do that has been done? Or will the done do be our undoing? That is the question. And so now we have the 4th step, We have to show up. We have to show up on a playing field, on a brand new playing field, playing a new game. Instead of dominate or be dominated, the new game is recognizing that we're all cells in a superorganism called humanity. We're all involved, the same organism. We're all one with the same oneness. The universe has us surrounded. Might as well surrender. And we surrender to the power of love. Now, we have been told that the Bible says where there's no vision, the people perish. And unfortunately, we have been so stuck in our little screens and our big screens, listening to what the mainstream media or even the internet media has been telling us. And I have to say something. There's only one media, one TV station that is telling the truth about what they're broadcasting. CBS. Well, if you don't want a CBS, then what? If you don't like the current programming, here's my suggestion. Turn off your TV and tell a vision instead. That is where I tell a vision to you, and you tell a vision to me, and we have healing and functional visions to step into, and that beats what we've been stepping into. I will tell my vision. Imagine think tanks where they think about more than tanks. Tanks, but no tanks. Imagine young people living for their country instead of dying for it. There's no future in dying for your country. And I want you to stretch your imagination now. I want you to imagine my dream, my vision. Imagine going to the voting booth and voting for the greater of two goods. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Swami, you're proposing a sane world. You must be crazy. But as I said, there's no need to change the world. There's a better way. I say, let's toilet train the world, and we'll never have to change it again. Now, I have another vision. I call it non-judgment day. Non-judgment day. That is when everybody in the world, all of the people win a beauty contest. On non-judgment day, all of the lawyers disappear. We won't need them. Our trials will be over. They can go to the beach, go play golf, and have fun. On non-judgment day, all of the nations at the United Nations will begin their sessions with the hokey pokey. I want you to imagine the Israelis and the Palestinians. They put their whole selves in. That is commitment. They pull their whole selves out. That is detachment. They turn themselves around. That is transformation. And that's what it's all about. So I want to thank you for being here. I have to catch a higher plane, but my cohort Steve will be here to answer questions. Namaste and namasko. Goodbye.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Swami Steve.
Okay, I'm going to flip my lid and we can have a conversation, okay? And I'll be a different person, okay?
Okay, go ahead. Switch egos.
Whoop.
Here he goes. Here
Here I am. I'm a whole new person now. Woo.
It's so good to have you here. So this is the part of the program where we allow all the participants to share thoughts, ask questions, basically be in circle. And we're getting pretty good at doing that via Zoom. So Katie is watching, and if people use the raise hand feature, she'll see you, or if you don't know how to do that, go like this and maybe we'll see you. And until we have a question or a comment, I'm just gonna do shtick with Steve.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the things I noticed about your shtick was that there was some Ken Wilber in there, some serious Ken Wilber. I think I heard you talk about the stages of waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up. That's straight out of one of my personal heroes, philosopher Ken Wilber.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Ken?
I don't know him personally, but I'm aware of his work. Again, I think that wisdom kind of boils down a lot of times. And what I appreciate about Ken Wilber's work is that it's integral, and it really looks to get beyond the kinds of dualities that we've had right now. our political system is suffering from this polarization. And if we can use the polarization as a dynamic duo, dance partners, and if we use the poles of progressive and conservative in a functional way, we would be asking, how do we want to progress and what do we want to conserve? Those would be two very functional questions. And so I've been working for the past dozen years or so in the domain of transpartisan politics to help us overcome the partisan trends and begin to recognize that each of the sides is an incomplete narrative. And right now, unfortunately, we have two very obsolete, and I would say obsolethal, political narratives working against each other. First of all, we have the traditional patriarchal, religious, conservative, which is still about domination. People elected Donald Trump because they thought he would dominate better, and that would make America great again. And I think we need to balance that out by, allowing him to leave office and make America grateful again. I think that would be the way we want to go. And on the other side, we have scientific materialism, which is where science becomes a religion. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that in the so-called progressive people who are stuck on defending vaccinations under all circumstances and defending allopathic medicine under all circumstances, believing that that reflects science, when really it reflects reductionism and a very Newtonian approach to science that has been actually disproven by science. And in Spontaneous Evolution, Bruce Lipton and I talk about the 4 myth perceptions of the apocalypse, things that we believe are true but have been disproved by science. That only the material world is real, that it's survival of the fittest, that evolution is a random process, and that we are at the mercy of our genes. And all of those have been proven to be not true. And so mainstream science, which is unfortunately, in a certain regard, controlled by the corporatism and big pharmaceutical companies, the science only exists as science if it affirms what that particular entity already believes. So I think that there is part of this upwising that's taking place is that people from all sides are involving themselves in an inquiry where they're willing to let go of these safe ideological positions and come together to learn from one another, which is what you're doing with your institute. Really.
Yes. And it's interesting. I'm following everything you're saying, partially because I am such a Ken Wilber fan. He actually wrote a book. He was so disgusted after the election that he wrote a book about how Trump became president. And you left out one meme in your history there. You left out the New Agers. You left out probably our core group of friends who have also contributed to the culture wars.
I left them out because the media leaves them out. The media has left them out. When Marianne Williamson at the Democratic debate began to talk about maybe we need to look at healthcare from a broader view, maybe look at what is making people sick. Why is it that our system is making people so sick, and then the same system is charging huge amounts of money to repair something that shouldn't have been done in the first place? And that was the last debate she was in. She was shut out of the debate after that. There was a big campaign to discredit her, try to associate her with the anti-vaccination movement, and so on. So Paul Ray wrote his book, The Cultural Creatives, in 1999, more than 20 years ago. And at that point, he said that the traditionals, the real conservatives, they were about, I think at that point, maybe 30%, and the moderns, which is the scientific materialist mainstream reality. That was about 40%. And the last I talked to Paul Ray, which is about 8 years ago, the cultural creatives had become 35%. But even being 1/3 of our adult population has not allowed them to have a media platform. Bruce Lipton cannot go on NPR. He will not be interviewed on NPR. And there's a certain smugness to the progressive side where they believe that they're more intelligent than everybody else. And all that means is that you have to be more sophisticated to manipulate people who think that way. So we're now seeing, as part of this uprising, we're seeing people turn more and more, particularly young people, to this more integral approach where we look at what can we learn from this, what can we learn from that, what do we need to discard here, and how have our blinders blinded us to what we need to see together now.
All really good points. So Katie, has anybody asked to speak?
Yes, Eric has raised his hand, and then Ruth as well.
Okay. Katie, tell them in what order. Eric?
Yes, Eric first. Eric first, yes.
Okay, thank you, Katie. And thank you, Steve, Swami Steve, for your wonderful routine, which was absolutely hilarious and very thought-provoking. And I also want to thank you for your very astute and insightful comments on the political situation and the culture wars in our society between the conservative traditionalists, the modern scientific materialists, and the New Age crowd. It's definitely flaring more than ever before, and I hope we can find a way to get through it and get this country back on track with a more integral view of what everybody is contributing and what, as you said, that needs to be discarded from each of the different points of view. My question to you, I guess, is sort of a general one about that issue, and kind of going back to one of the really clever turns of phrase that you had, where you said that we need to get everybody to go from a-hole to b-hole, right? So in my opinion, that really is kind of the essence of it, is that there's too many a-holes in our society and not enough b-hole people, right? And I would argue that that is true among all three of these cultural memes. It's not just that, oh, the conservatives are all a bunch of a-holes, but the liberals, oh, you know, we're the wonderful people whose, you know, poop doesn't stink and all that, right? You know, there's a lot of nastiness on the left as well. So how do you believe that, what would you say are some tips or some thoughts or insights that you have about how we can get everyone, including our own kind, so to speak, to recognize that being an a-hole is basically a big part of the problem, and that until people stop being a-holes and start being more integral minded and see their own flaws and their own strengths and the strengths of people that aren't like them and don't think like them, in addition to those people's flaws, which I would say is what b-hole means. I would see it that way. How do we do that? How do we get people to recognize that that's what needs to happen? And what are some kind of pragmatic tips that you would have for pulling that off?
Well, I'm gonna speak generally, and then I'll speak practically. Generally, we just passed Independence Day. And I think that there's really 3 steps, not just independence. There's interdependence, independence, and interdependence. Interdependence is where we have our own connection with source, whatever we call it. Whatever that ineffable, that ineffable power of love, that when we feel it and when we experience it, we recognize that we don't need to get something from people out there. And, you know, as I said in joke, we've been living under the rule of the lowest common denominator. It's in our DNA. And that fear-based if I don't do it to them, they're going to do it to me attitude has to be healed. And the primary way that we heal that is in ourselves. So in order to be able to engage as an independent, as we call it, a sovereign soul, S-O-U-L, provider, how we engage as a sovereign soul provider, we have to have that relationship with spirit intact so that we recognize that we are whole in and of ourselves, and we don't need to get something from people out there. And then as independent individuals, we are capable of this interdependence. We are able to recognize our own shadow. We are able to forgive ourselves. Forgiveness is very, very important. And people revert to anger, often to cover fear or to cover grief. So anger is the easiest emotion, easiest of the negative emotions to express. It often covers up all of these other tragedies. As a body politic, we've been in post-traumatic stress disorder since the first Kennedy assassination. And the entire, everything that's gone forward since 1963 has been tainted by what Bob Dylan just called murder most foul. In his new album, he's got a whole 6-minute song about the impact of the Kennedy assassination. Interestingly, none of the interviewers ever asked him about that song, but that's a whole other story. So in recognizing we have to have this relationship with spirit, whatever we call it, as a first step in order to be able to engage as mature, spiritually mature human beings. Meanwhile, there's a wonderful project that's been going on for several years called Living Room Conversations, and I've been a part of that. And that's where, just like we're together here on Zoom, it used to be done in living rooms, but now it's done in Zoom during these times. And people from different points of view get to meet. If it's in person, they share some food. And basically, it is rehumanizing one another. Because when you're dealing with these stereotypes of what the other side looks like, they've been dehumanized. And I totally agree with you that the progressives do it, the New Agers do it, everybody does it about people who don't believe the way that they do. And it's often a sense of superiority that's based on fear. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? And so the more secure we are in who we are, the better we're able to listen to other people respectfully. So these conversations, it's called Living Room Conversations. You can Google it, find out how to do this in your own neighborhood. It's a way to get people from different points of view to rehumanize one another and listen respectfully. And we're able to listen respectfully to another's point of view without having to change that point of view or dominate them, and recognize their humanity and recognize the universality of our human condition. One more thing, on the positive side, I think the Black Lives Matter demonstration, long overdue in really bringing home what it's like to be an African American in this country. I grew up in a housing project, mostly Black neighborhood. And I saw this firsthand as a kid, as a teenager, et cetera, et cetera. It's very important that this is happening. However, it is ultimately a divisive movement. And the Democratic Party, rather than deal with the real fundamental issues like the environment, like economic justice, really, like the redistribution or redistribution of wealth and resources, like restoring our soil instead of turning it over to Monsanto, Bayer. Instead of dealing with those issues, the Democratic Party has focused on identity issues. And I think we need to shift the focus to the identical issues that all humans face: clean air, clean water, clean food, clean government.
Awesome.
Okay, Ruth had her hand up, so I will unmute her now.
Greetings, everybody. Swami, I heard you not long ago at Toddy Blackson's house.
Oh, no
It's
kidding.
always wonderful to hear
Yeah.
you. What you're saying never gets stale. It's always fresh and new and important. I've been hearing for quite a few years now, especially from my conservative friends. How should I say? Proud to say that can you hear me?
Yeah.
I listen to both liberal and conservative radio on a regular basis and television stations. I don't ever want to not hear what the people who think differently than I do, what they're saying. And I think it's important. The university campuses now, the big complaint is by conservatives is that it's been taken over by left-wing professors, and even at the place where we would most want to be able to hear another opinion, another idea, another approach, we can't hear it because any professor that says anything which is in any way threatening to the leftist philosophy ideas is criticized by his colleagues and very often let go. And speakers, conservative speakers, are not invited to universities either. So considering that the universities are supposed to be the ideal place for these kind of open-ended, frank, bipartisan discussion, and it's not happening there, when you look around, where are the places, aside from your living room dialogues, which sounds wonderful, where are the places where you see the model of what your vision, you're telling us your vision? Where do you see it really happening?
Well, I think first of all, I want to reiterate what you said. This has been, I haven't been on campus as a teacher for years, but I did a program at a campus in Florida 2 years ago, and one of the people, the young woman who was the most vital, the most vivacious, the most present, listening, she said, "I don't feel I can express myself here. I don't feel I can be myself." And she's probably a conservative, maybe religious, and I call it the tyranny of the powerless. And when people, when you're when you've been oppressed and you don't achieve really full consciousness, you then oppress other people. One of the great moments in my life, when I was a student at Brooklyn College in New York, I got to go hear Malcolm X after he returned from Africa, from Mecca, and had the realization that it wasn't black or white, that it was all about human beings. And he got struck by enlightening, as Swami would say. And it was a very, very powerful speech and understanding. And I think that the powers that be in power that want to keep us divided and conquered are very happy to have the progressive side become the new Stalinists and the new fascists. I think the way that we hold the conversations is outside the mainstream media. I'm now very happy to say I'm working very closely with a new platform that is emerging this fall called Mobilized. And we're doing a program called Reset Humanity, taking the opportunity of this break that we have in the action to create a reset. And these are going to be conversations that are integral conversations that are not arguments between the left and right, but rather honor and acknowledge both of those viewpoints and allow us to learn from one another. One of my great teachers was Joseph Mccormick, and he and I wrote a little ebook called Reuniting America. Joseph was a conservative, transpartisan activist, and he had a group that he ran in Seattle where he brought together the entire political spectrum. And once the people stopped yelling at one another, then they were able to have conversations and they mutually learned from one another. So for those on the call, I can send you a copy of the ebook. And at the end of the introduction to the ebook, you'll see the statement that this left-right, progressive green, conservative, libertarian group put together a statement about what they agree on. It will bring you to tears. So we need to step away from the mainstream media because the mainstream media is determined to keep us divided. That is its dysfunctional function. So anytime we can create these conversations, out in public. I engage with people wherever I go. I start conversations. And what I find, I traveled around the country last year, give you one more brief anecdote. And I talked to a lot of conservative, young conservative, alt-right men, maybe in their 30s. And I said to them, I said, you know, the oldest political scam in the game is divide and conquer. And divide and conquer is the way to control populations by keeping people from unifying around the virtues and values that they share in common. If you look at American politics, we've been intentionally divided into these two tribes so that we can't hold our government accountable. And the response I got was, oh, yes, wow, that's absolutely true. So if you create a meta conversation that brings people above and beyond the puppet show discourse that's going on, that is being entertained by mainstream media, you can begin to get real conversations going. That's what we're doing with Mobilize, and it'll be starting up in September.
Okay, Darcy has her hand up, so I will unmute her now. If it will go. She might have to unmute herself if she muted herself. There you go.
There we go. So along the same lines of the divisiveness that's in this country right now, and the divisiveness politically, excuse me, and the right and the left, where is the truth in all of this? Because truth itself has no emotion. It just is. It has no color. It has no team. It just is. How do we get the two groups that are so far apart to the truth? And how do people who are really earnestly looking for the truth, when you really, how do we find it in this day and age with the media such that it is, and the secrecy of things that shouldn't be secret to us as citizens of this country? I know, wow, that's a lot. I'm just gonna stop there.
Thanks, Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, the Swami has a saying, beliefs lie in your head. The truth lives in your heart. And what's happened is that we have become a very head-based culture. We're very much focused on ideas, structures, intellect, etc. And we have forgotten the one piece, the missing piece at the center of our country, and perhaps at the center of humanity. It's that, what I would call the sacred center, where there's an awareness that takes us beyond religion and beyond non-religion to a place where we can feel what love feels like. We know what love feels like. We know what it feels like. And we also know what the absence of love feels like. So when Joseph McCormick did his groups, the first thing that would happen when people sat together at the beginning, there wasn't a prayer. There was a moment of silence. And the silence was the acknowledgement of the truth. The silence was the acknowledgement of the truth beyond ideas, beyond the intellect, beyond the mental structures that we have. And there was something about that moment of silence that put people into a reset. It made them more receptive. They were more receptive. And in that reset, they were able to receive and hear other people as human beings. That is really what this is all about. When we've looked at the instances where people from different sides have been brought together in successful discourse, it has always been about the unity of the heart, what we have in common. So when Joseph did his groups, the first thing he would ask is, as a child, what did America mean to you as a child? And so you're listening to everybody's ideas. You're listening to everybody's stories of their own childhood. And you start to realize that person, even though they have a different perspective, they're a lot like I am. They're a lot like I am. Divide and conquer has been a very, very powerful way to make sure that people don't have those conversations, that they demonize the person on the other side. So beyond all of these conspiracy theories and all of that, what we're looking to do through our Mobilize and Reset program is we want to gather people around what they want. What do we all want? What do we all want? That's the vision. What do we all want? What kind of world do we want to live in? What are our visions for our children and our grandchildren in their future? And when you get people together from all sides, you know what? You find that everybody has those same goals. There was something that happened a few years ago. There were some swimmers who were caught in a riptide off the coast of Florida, and they were about to drown. And the people from the beach made a human chain to reach those people and pull them to safety. And I guarantee that in that human chain, there weren't people going, "Excuse me, are you a Democrat or a Republican?" Everybody was literally pulling together in the same direction in a tug of peace rather than the tug of war that we have. So if we were all to pull together, what would we be pulling for? All of us together. You change the perspective, you put the conflicts, you don't deny that we disagree. You put the conflicts in the background and you put what we all want in the foreground, and that's how you create the means for cooperation and rehumanizing one another.
Yeah, one of our advisory board members is a teacher of polarity theory. And what you're describing is exactly how they approach dichotomous groups. I took a week of the training, and one of the first things they have the groups do, because they're usually brought in when there's extreme polarization, either in the workplace or actually the class I attended, the police chief of Charleston, South Carolina was there. He was dealing with old cops and new cops with very different approaches to police work. Anyway, the first thing they do is they have each side describe what they admire about the other side. That's step one, because you will, we can talk about, oh, the nationalists are so bad, and they're not thinking globally, they're not loving the starving child in India. Well, that was the great generation. Those were the people who built the bridges and the dams and would sacrifice for the next generation. I mean, that's the ethic of that meme. So everything you're describing is just so practical in addition to being beautiful. And anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. I'm thinking we
know that these things need to be done. We just don't have the institutions in place yet. And the institutions right now are controlled by those who don't want things to change. I'll give you an example. Joseph McCormick, and he's still a good friend of mine. He moved to China several years ago. He's married to a Chinese woman who is a Qigong master, and they have a little baby, 2 little babies now, because he felt that for his own spiritual development, he needed to be away from work that fed his own ego, so to speak. But he was very effective. And one of the first things he did, he got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, and they brought together leaders of different polarized groups. And this one retreat, they had the president of the Sierra Club, they had the conservative tax guy Grover Norquist.
Oh, Lord.
The guy that wanted to, I have to tell you this, the guy that wanted to drown the government in a bathtub. And I have to say that after he was exposed to San Francisco Bay Area liberals, he completely changed. Now he wants to drown them in a hot tub. This is very different. So, but anyway, so Joseph brought together those polarities. Michelle Combs, who is the head of the Christian Coalition, Joan Blades, the head of Move On, and Joan and Kristen became good friends. They had kids the same age. They were both mothers. They started something called Motherhood Rising, and they took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, Move On and Christian Coalition, to preserve net neutrality. They shut down the switchboards of Congress, and they got their way because they brought these 2 very formidable forces working together for common good. Now, when Joseph wanted to bring together ordinary citizens, we had the Transpartisan Citizen Summit in Denver in 2009. When he wanted to do that, there was no Rockefeller Foundation money for that, because that would have taken us too far away from the elites ruling, whether they're the liberal elites or the conservative elites. You know, behind the puppet show, beneath all of that, there are the same forces that are influencing politics from both ends. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. The con men and pirates have been doing this for generations, and the sad part of it is that, well, I was going to say sad, I say conservatives are more aware of this because I think they're more willing to look at the shadow. And progressives have really not wanted to look at some of the heart of darkness, and that's why people were so devastated when Trump became president. How did it happen? Mm-hmm. Well, it happened by good people over long, long periods of time. I call it Nazism, choosing to not see what's too uncomfortable to look at. Mm-hmm. Sometimes jokes aren't funny, you know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely lingering in the air. Katie, has anybody else got their hand up?
Not with the hand raise feature, and most people don't have their screens on, so I'm guessing not.
Okay.
Oh wait, Darcy does now.
Go ahead, Darce.
I just had a really good question, and now I can't remember it. But about seeing the shadow or seeing the dark part of things. So you say that you had said that you seem to think that the conservatives see that more.
Certain parts of it.
So, like, for example, the whole the different policies that Trump has enacted, such as, you know, the separation of the families and things like that. How does that get justified by the people who, you know, the more Christian-y people who seem to really back him, not just in that instance, but a lot of the other instances of things that are questionably immoral, I would imagine, from whatever side you're at. How does that get rationalized away? Or
I think it's patriarchy uber alles. I think that the traditionalists, particularly when fear is infused, you know, Fox News has been infusing fear for 35 years now, and a narrative to fear the other, fear people who are different, fear the Mexicans, fear this group or that group. And so more than being Christians, the Christian right is patriarchal. And so because Donald Trump supports these patriarchal views, many of them have gone over to his side. Many exceptions. One of my favorites, and I've interviewed him on my radio show, is Chuck Baldwin. And Chuck was one of the founders of the Christian Coalition, very, very, very conservative Christian minister who was hip to George Bush and Dick Cheney and their war machine, and he's hip to Donald Trump. The Mormons in Utah, they were not taken in by Trump. In fact, they ran a candidate, Evan McMullen. I believe he got 25 or 30% of the vote in Utah because the Mormons had enough of a community and enough of a solid belief system to countervail Donald Trump. What I meant about the conservatives when I went to the Transpartisan Citizen Summit in Denver, there was an entire panoply. I mean, Grover Norquist was there by video. Cynthia McKinney, the very liberal congresswoman from Georgia, she was there. And I did my comedy routine for everybody. The people that I ended up having the closest connection with, and this is very, very strange, that we had instantly had a rapport and a connection that felt like a bond. I couldn't explain it, were the militia people from Idaho, the gun people from Idaho. And what I kind of figured is that a lot of the people on the conservative side have been in the military. And being in the military, they've got to experience firsthand the perpetrations that this country has been a part of. The progressives don't want to have, they don't want to look at it. You know, somebody told me about, they were talking about Israel. This is 20 years ago, before the Intifada that created this latest batch of troubles. And he's, you know, he's gone to Israel numerous times. He's Jewish. And he said, the Jewish people do not like war. They don't want to fight a war. And so what they will do is they will try to put it as far away as possible from themselves. And so he said they wanted to, they turned it over to the Israeli government. We call it a don't ask, don't tell policy. You promise not to ask what we're doing, and we promise not to tell you. And the same thing has happened on the progressive side in this country, that when people talk about conspiracy theories, and conspiracy theory was a term that was popularized in the late 1960s by the CIA to keep people from poking around the Kennedy assassination, to try to discredit people for doing that. And I have found that over the years that because they have been in situations that have been more related to the darker side, many conservatives are willing to look at that part of the shadow. They're not willing to look at the shadow of Christianity or a shadow of racism or any of those things necessarily. But in terms of seeing the shadow of our country, you know, there's not this patriotism that it used to be 20 or 30 years ago. It's recognizing that we've been, that the American empire has been a bad player. And I would say that more conservatives than progressives know about Smedley Butler, who is the most decorated Marine as of the 1930s, who wrote a book called War is a Racket. And it talked about how he was really, in the early 1900s, he wasn't fighting for America, he was fighting on behalf of United Fruit Company and US Rubber. Conservatives know about Smedley Butler. Progressives hardly have heard of him. So I think that each group has had a silo of history. And Joseph Mccormick, coming from the very, very conservative side, he said when he read Howard Zinn's People's History of America, he said, that turned me around. That gave me a perspective that I didn't have. And so if you feel safe enough in your heart, knowing who you are and not having your identity so caught up in a political position, then you're more susceptible to an integral view.
Definitely so.
Darcy, did that make sense?
Yeah, the
It
silos.
did. It did. Thank you very much.
Thanks for asking me.
The problem of silos is real, regardless of, you know, where we fall in the spectrum of consciousness. And there is a lot of purposeful denial, you know, not looking at the reality of issues. And it's interesting where the conservatives are sometimes brave, and then where the liberals are sometimes brave. It's fascinating how these issues have split, oftentimes along lines that you wouldn't have predicted. You know, protection of the planet being one of them. To me, what, you know, in the abstract, what's more conservative than wanting to conserve the resources and the natural beauty and the, you know, the future of the planet. So it's interesting how these groups split along not even logical contextual lines.
If you look at the power of fear, if you look at what fear does, fear narrows the perspective. Fear makes you want to hunker with your tribe. And look at what's happening on the progressive side, the cancel culture, which I call the cancer culture. The cancel culture is as toxic as Trumpism. And people on the left, people are being maligned, they're being canceled, they're being deplatformed. The left is accepting censorship of alternative views of vaccination, of COVID, in fact, they've deplatformed Andrew Saul, who is a world-renowned expert on vitamin C, for talking about vitamin C. So what's happened is that the progressives are as fascistic in that regard, and they're very vocal and they're very willing to cancel somebody, and then there are people who are terrified of being canceled. I'll give you an example. There's a famous meditation center, and one of the people who is teaching at this famous Buddhist meditation center expressed the position that, you know, there's basically two sexes, right? Well, for saying that, she was so maligned that they fired her. Not because they wanted to fire her, but because of the pushback from the special interest groups that want to make sure that only progressive points of view get aired in that particular case. And there's some really weird, toxic stuff, you know? Somebody asked the Swami at a show recently, Swami, what's your take on gender fluidity? And Swami said, well, if the fluid comes out the front, you're one gender. If it comes out the bottom, you're another. And that's gender fluidity. But I could be canceled for saying something like that. I could be kicked off campus for telling that joke. And, you know, that is, you know, that's the worst kind of fascism, I would call it. The free speech, I'm in Berkeley right now. We're living in the Berkeley Hills. That's where the free speech movement originated 56 years ago in 1964. But Berkeley is not a bastion of free speech anymore, unless it's speech that the powers in power, which in this case are the progressive left, want to hear. You will not have a conservative speaker allowed to speak on campus here.
Well, even some of our liberal entertainers won't go to campus. I mean, Bill Maher, who I adore, he's notoriously had it with college-age kids in particular. Because of the over political correctness. Does anybody else have a question or something to contribute to Circle?
Yeah, I just like to add something, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First of all, I said this has been very refreshing. I love hearing this, and I really want to have access to the ebook. So maybe Darcy.
I'll send a copy. I'll send a copy to Laura, and she can disperse it. Okay, yeah, that will be great. Making it available for free, and I'll let people make donations if they want to do that, but it's free, and we'll send it.
And as somebody who's actually, I'm a student at Wake Forest School of Divinity, and everything you're saying is like spot on. There is not a conservative speaker within 50 miles of Wake Forest School of Divinity, and a conservative voice cannot be heard there. I'm a true independent. I kind of hate both sides equally. But politics today reminds me of, well, my younger brother's a conservative congressman, and he thinks I'm a left-wing liberal, and my liberal friends think I'm a right-wing conservative. So I'm dead on the fence, and I'm hated by both sides. Because I don't really agree. There's certain aspects.
Hold on, you're loved at the Oracle Institute.
All right. But,
you know that.
Politics today,
we're in the void. We're in the void.
Thank you, Laura. I love you guys. I love you, everybody there too. So, but politics today reminds me of the old WWF wrestling I used to watch when I was a kid. And it's like either politician, and I'm always reminding myself that most of these politicians are playing into the hands of their constituents, just like the wrestlers used to. Is so, you know, I mean, even Donald Trump was a Democrat for many years. For most of his adult life, he operated as a Democrat. So, and he could have probably run and won as I don't know if he could have won as a Democrat, but he could have very easily, you know, run as a Democrat. And, you know, so it was like, you know, a lot of times politicians will speak and they're not speaking their true feelings. They're speaking what their constituents want to hear, because ultimately they want to be reelected, and it's their people that want to reelect them. So they're literally just like the WWF wrestlers. They're acting, and because they want to get reelected, and it's all about power and controlling like the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, and so they want power. So. But the last thing I'll say is my father told me many years ago that all politics is guns versus butter, and at its root core, it said that the right, the conservative, want more guns and conservative programs, the military, things like that, and the Democrats and the liberal want better schools, environment, better roads, they call it, and social programs, which is your butter programs, and. So that's literally what the fight boils down to. And he said he learned that as in high school, back in the 50s. So it's old guns versus butter. So that's all I want to add. Thank you.
Well, that's true. And the elephant and donkey in the living room, because both parties are susceptible to it, is money and politics. I read that a senator has to raise about $6,000 a day for 6 years in order to finance the next electoral campaign. So basically, while they're looking to pander to various interest groups for votes, they know that bottom line, no matter what they tell their voters, they have to actually hew to whatever their financial supporters want. So the political system is fundamentally about money. And what we're seeing out there is a puppet show. Very few congressional seats really change. Incumbents have a great opportunity, particularly with gerrymandering, where you're in a safe district. So somebody can come out with a very extreme point of view that works in getting elected in a safe district, and then when they come into Congress and have to try to bang out some compromise and some laws, they're not suited for that. So the money aspect of our political system, and also the polarization and putting people into these ideological teams so that they don't really get to solve problems. It's really more short-run satisfying to be right than it is to actually solve a problem. And so we're seeing problems getting kicked down the field, and this is why we're a failed state, basically.
Yeah. Anybody else, Katie?
Not that I'm seeing.
Not at the moment.
I think Tom had his hand up over there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Hi. You mentioned earlier.
Do I know you?
Yes, you do. I'm from Charlottesville, and we were together.
Okay, you're Thomas Jefferson. I know you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know you as Thomas Jefferson, but I know you're Tom Hansen.
Well, yeah, I'm Tom Hansen, right.
Yeah.
But it relates because you mentioned independence, and I've often wondered what would have happened if the Declaration had been left the way it was started. Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable, that all men are created equal." And that's, I'm not making it up. I mean, you can find it written that way by hand, and then it was crossed out by the committee, particularly Franklin, to say self-evident. So what kind of difference might that have made if it had said sacred and undeniable? Now, it's perfectly logical to not have sacred and undeniable because it was a break from the church. But maybe it went too far, because using self-evident means that our logic and our non-spiritual mind will be used to determine whether or not people are equal and help make them equal. But if it had been left sacred and undeniable, maybe we would have started the country by seeing each person as a spiritual being level, and work from that level throughout. So since you brought up independence, I ask you that question. Do you think that would have made any difference? Does it matter?
What a great question. You know, that's the difference between Jefferson and Franklin. I mean, Franklin was a Rosicrucian, you know, Franklin was a Mason, et cetera, et cetera. And I think his spirituality was much more to the practical end of things, you know, whereas Jefferson was more of a mystic. He was more of a mystic in that regard, you know, more influenced by the Native Americans. His father, accompanying his father on these various excursions and meeting Native American chiefs, I could see where he would recognize a universal sacredness expressed in deism. And he was, I think, much more, maybe he was half deist and half Taoist. What do you think?
Maybe.
But I think that, you know, for the times that they lived in, it was quite a radical thing to imagine that rights came from something other than the king. I don't know that sacred would have been better understood. Sacred, and what was the other word that he wanted?
Sacred and undeniable.
Undeniable.
Sacred and
Sacred
undeniable.
and undeniable. Self-evident. Yeah, I could see where. Yeah, I like sacred and undeniable. Maybe we'll just start saying it that way from here on.
Well, I don't think it'll happen because it's again and again said, Jefferson said, all humans, everyone's created, it's self-evident that they're created equal. Most people don't know that that's not what Jefferson wrote, but they say Jefferson wrote that. So yeah, just, you know, it's a theoretical question because things have gone the way they've gone and we don't know what would have happened otherwise. But yes, it was Franklin who really insisted that that be changed. Yeah, but that was
an interesting story, Tom. Maybe you know something about it. A friend of mine is working with a water filtration company called Mazzi, M-A-Z-Z-E-I. And one of the members of the Mazzi family was a great wine grower in Italy and came to work with Jefferson and helped him plant his vineyards. And according to the story, my friend told me that Mazzi actually gave him the idea for all men are created equal. So I just heard this a week ago. So,
well, the idea had certainly been around. By the way, the reincarnation of Mazzi or Matsai did live in Charlottesville till he died 2 years ago. He lived here for quite a while.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll have to tell my friend Jim. What was his name? Do you remember his name?
I'm not allowed to tell his name.
Oh, okay. Oh, you can't. Okay, good. We'll have to talk to our friend Walter or something. But that's interesting. I'll keep that under my turban. It's good to see you, Tom. It's been years.
Yeah.
Along those lines, Tom brings up a really interesting point about our formal mission statement. The Oracle Institute's formal mission statement is Thomas Jefferson's Act for Religious Freedom. Mm-hmm. And I don't have it memorized, but basically it says that truth, if left to her natural defenses, free argument and debate, has nothing to fear. And I've been thinking about our mission statement a lot lately in this post-truth era. And I've been really wondering if that's true, whether truth can always prevail when we live in a world in which there's tons of fake news, but even for me, more damaging, I find, is the relativism that you're entitled to your truth, I'm entitled to mine, that there is no objective truth, that there is no absolute truth. I'm just curious what you think about that. And since Tom is still on the line, I'm curious about whether you think our mission statement is true, Tom. Is truth going to be okay?
Well, you want to go first, Tom? You go first.
Oh, well, I think the essence of it is true. Yeah. So, but everything gets twisted around. I think you have the right mission statement. I'm not going to say anything else about that, but and you're doing, you know, you're following it. So, you know, we need freedom of religion, and we need freedom from religion. And there's you know, Gary Renard. I think Steve, you know.
I know Gary. Yes, I've met him.
There's a book that I guess he didn't write, but someone wrote it for him with Gary, you know, going along, you know, helping out,
yeah.
Where they compared Jefferson's view of Jesus and of the early days with the Gospel of Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
the Gnostic Gospels, and they found quite a similarity between the two, between the statement of Virginia for religious freedom and the Gnostic Gospels. More similarity there than with the standard, if there's a standard Christian church today, but with the Orthodox Church. So I mean, I think the statement you're using, Laura, is able to be interpreted in different ways. So Steve, what do you say?
Could I chime in for just a second before we go to Steve's answer? It's about what Tom said, with your permission.
Sure.
You know, I think it's so remarkable that that line, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, people don't see that. They don't feel that way today. That's the problem. If we all believed that these are the truths that are self-evident, that we're all entitled to life, liberty, then we wouldn't be having so many problems. There are people that still, I would say, you know, from an elite point of view, don't believe that is self-evident. They think some people are more equal than others. And so even if we just take that one line and we examine our history, I think our history is actually a demonstration of the lack of it being self-evident.
Good point, Ruth. That's a really good point.
If I could add a little bit to that, you know, if we had started with sacred and undeniable, maybe the general consensus today would be that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And say that the physical experience is not self-evident, that we're all equal. But that's not who we are. We're not these physical beings. We're spiritual beings. And at that level, in that oneness of Christ consciousness, whatever term, yeah, we are equal. And it will be very hard perhaps for us to reach that equality level of treatment and recognition at the physical level. But, you know, this physical world could be an illusion. You know, a lot of people have said that. It could be a simulation. Maybe we're all going to learn that and accept that eventually. So if we keep thinking that we're physical beings, we're going to think, I'm nothing then. I'm in the simulation, just a character in the simulation. But if we know that we're spiritual beings having the physical experience, that doesn't affect us at all, because we know we're eternal and in oneness. So it could be that if we'd started out differently, we would be in a different place now. I don't know. We can't go back and change that. But we can try to, as Laura's doing, and Steve, maybe everybody, we do try to teach that we are spiritual beings first.
Yeah, I think that there is the beginning of an understanding about that. And I think that's why I say we need to go beyond religion and non-religion to that sacred center that has been missing. You know, when we became an urban society, when we became a society where the influence of religion, whether you like religion or not, the influence of religion diminished, we essentially, in becoming a secular society, began to worship the 3 M's: money, mechanics, and the machine. And so we've got, and the materialism. And so that's what we have right now. That is what is the sacred, the profane at the center of our sacred center. And part of the realization of people coming from above and beyond these two polarities, the religion, patriarchal religion and godless science, is that beyond those is the possibility of having a truly integral view, and we're growing toward that. Metaphorically, I like the metaphor of the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis. Right now, we are in the midst of this chaos inside the chrysalis, and there's caterpillar debris falling everywhere. and all of the fallen institutions, all of the illusions that are shattering. Swami calls it the irony curtain is coming down, as we're seeing these contradictions. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the mainstream media, because they don't want to cover it, the imaginal cells, the new cells of this new butterfly organism, are finding one another. They're gathering in community. And one of our ambitions with this mobilized platform is to actually be a place where the imaginal cells can cohere and become a coherent organism that establishes that sacred center as something that is beyond religion. It's very much like the sacred and undeniable. Sacred and undeniable is not a religious dogma. It's an understanding that we get from the inside out. And as more people allow themselves to have that inside out experience and meet with other people who've had that and reinforce it, then we can feel safe enough to leave the safe harbors of the left-right ideologies, which I like to say have outlived their uselessness.
How did that?
There was another question in there that I think I missed. What was the other question? Was there about your mission statement and so on? Oh, truth. It was about truth.
What do you think truth eventually will rise above the postmodern attacks?
Well, I mean, I think Ken Wilber was talking about that in his latest book, and that's a blind side of progressivism. If you live by relativism, you're going to die by relativism. And I think that the truth about the truth is that we really do have to find the truth in our own heart. And that's much more of a truth of who we are, who I am in relation to spirit, who you are in relation to spirit, and a lot less about the circumstances of life. When my wife Trudy and I have an argument, at the end, we often laugh and go, wow, we were both right from our perspective, because we each had a piece of the puzzle, and because we weren't listening to one another, our egos were battling it out on the battlefield. The safer we feel in our own selves as a spiritual being having a human experience, the safer we feel with that, the more open we're going to be to allow our ego to say, oh, I was wrong. Oh, I was wrong. And as a friend of mine says, those are the three most powerful words in the English language. I was wrong. When you mean it, when you go, I was wrong. Because nobody wants to be wrong. And so many of the battles that we fight are about that, the ego, that we've set in place to protect ourselves in this material world. God forbid we're wrong. God forbid we look bad. God forbid we make a mistake. And so when you start to bring the power of forgiveness into this whole thing and allow the forgiveness to come through, then you realize that you liberate yourself from the prison of the past by truly being done with something and recognizing from the larger perspective your own complicity in that. That's really, in order for us to survive as a species, we have to achieve spiritual maturity in a hurry.
Yes. My
joke is, of course, Jesus believed in evolution. Otherwise, he would have said, now don't do a thing till I get back. So we've been charged with spiritual evolution. And as Alan Watts said, instead of worshiping the finger, follow where the finger is pointing.
Very good. Well, on that note, I think we're probably gonna, you got somebody else, Katie?
Yeah, Eric just had his hand raised for a while.
Last question, because we're going up on 8:30. Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you for just fitting me in. I'll try to be really brief. Mostly, I just wanted to say thank you for, this has been one of the most amazing philosophical discussions that I've listened in on or been part of in a long time. So thank you for Steve and Tom and everyone else who has contributed to it. I just wanted to kind of comment really briefly on the whole question about the Declaration of Independence and how that relates to the question of truth and relativism. What I was thinking is that Thomas Jefferson may have been, really far ahead of his time. I mean, I think everybody believes he was. I think he was probably more ahead of his time even than most people realize. People think of him as that he was just a rationalist and that he didn't have a spiritual side. He was this like mechanical mind dude, like how Tolkien says, a mind of metal and wheels, that a lot of people think of Jefferson, and that's a very popular view of Jefferson on the left right now, is that he was this menacing intellectual tyrant kind of guy, But I actually think that, that Jefferson did have a spiritual side, and I think the fact that he saw the issue of human equality and human universality as a sacredness shows that. And so I don't think people give Jefferson enough credit. Now, having said that, I also think that, America sort of had to go through these phases of the spectrum of consciousness, like Ken Wilber talks about. And maybe in order to come out of the phase of traditional orthodoxy, we had to go through the phase of totally rejecting that and, embracing this ultra-logical materialism point of view. Like you said, Steve, the money and mechanization and all of that. And then, only after going through that and seeing the flaws of that point of view, can we get to the point where we can rediscover spirituality. And I think that's what the New Age has been doing. But then I think the next phase, and this is where very, very few have gotten to the point of even being able to see the flaws in the progressive left of the world of religion and spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And there definitely is. So, to kind of turn this into a question, I guess, and, so that Steve can kind of have the last word. My question is, Steve, or, how do you feel about, are we making any progress here? Like, I mean, how far away are we in America today from the rise of a truly integral worldview where we can move beyond the relativism of the New Age and the radical left and get to a point where people can actually say, yeah, we believe in absolute truth, but absolute truth includes the insights of all of these different points of view. Do you see that? I mean, are we making progress, or are we still incredibly far away from that? Are we going to see that happen in the next few decades? Do you think that people that have that point of view will be able to gain influence, or are we still just light years away from that happening?
Well, the answer is yes to all of that. The Swami says, I don't make predictions because I don't want to lose my nonprofit status. But I will say that simultaneously, it's like the best of times and the worst of times. The awakening, when people wake up, they don't go back to sleep. And I'm not talking about being woke, I'm talking about being awakened. Very different. Being woke is being differently asleep in my book, because it only takes into consideration one tribal group. I think that this is what wants to happen, but we have free will on this planet, and there are forces working for and against. And if you believe in parallel universes, there's a parallel universe where we already made it, and there's one where we blew ourselves up already. So at this point, what we have is our purpose and intention. And so it's really what Bruce Lipton and I wrote in Spontaneous Evolution. I want to end with this because I think it points us in a direction. We said that there's three steps. Evolutionary awareness. In other words, we're aware that we're in the midst of a crisis and we have to evolve in order for us to go through this passage and survive as a species. We have to begin to cooperate rather than devolve into autoimmune dysfunction of killing one another. Number two is evolutionary intention. In other words, now that I know that we have a choice, where do I land? How do I live my life on a daily basis? how do I live these principles? How do I move the evolution forward in word, thought, and deed? And then finally, in my actions and how I manifest things on the earth on a daily basis, how does this resonate with this evolutionary reality? I think the more we wake up in the morning and with the awareness, we have a choice today. It's unwritten. We don't know yet how it's going to end, but I know where I want it to go. I'm going to work for that. I set my intention. I focus my purpose on creating a world that works for each and all. And I look at my activities. What am I doing on a daily basis? What is it that contributes to that? And what is it that does not contribute to that? And that's how I make my decisions. So it's all up for grabs, but it's the only game in town. It's the best game to play. The game of, Bucky Fuller called it the world game. And it beats the hell out of the end of the world game, which is the game plan that the devolution has in mind. So this is part of the awakening. It's an awakening of the heart. It's an awakening of kindness. And those acts that come from the heart, you have no idea what the positive reverberations and repercussions are going to be. So that's where we stand. And I appreciate your comments about this conversation. We need more conversations that take us outside the boundaries of these ideologies that no longer work. So thank you, Eric, for bringing that up.
Thank you very much, Steve.
And thank you, Laura.
Well, this has been
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Well, thanks. This has been a wonderful salon. They've actually all been amazing. This one in particular, though, really set the stage. It's funny that comedy did that, really set the stage for a piercing analysis, and in addition, feeling into our hearts and wondering, as people who do want to build a new world, how do we contribute? I just want to mention really fast, if there are any second-tier humans out there, either with us right now, or we do have this recorded who see this tape later, we are building a community here. It's called the Valley of Light. We're looking for cultural creatives. We're loosely patterned on the Federation of Damanhur, which to my knowledge is the only second-tier community on the planet. So I just want to put a plug in for our community because I think it's easier to do this with others. So Steve, thank you so much.